Our final speaker before lunch is Christina Jansen, and she's part of the Scottish Gallery in Edinburgh, which you won't need me to remind you is a fine art gallery established way back in 1842 and part of the historic New Town in Edinburgh. The Scottish Gallery is a house of art which specialises in pictures and objects. Christina herself studied industrial design at Manchester and also architecture and decorative arts at Glasgow. And after a 2-year stint in London, which included working for the Tate, the V&A Museum and the Crafts Council, she became involved with the Scottish Gallery in 1997, becoming the director in 2008, and now is the managing director. So welcome and thank you for travelling to us.
Thank you. It's actually hard to have a stylish hairdo and wear the Stralified spectacle. So I'm on the dark side. I sell work, so I don't make work, I deal with talent. And so my job is very exciting because I'm not dealing with the education side of things, I'm dealing with the artists, I'm dealing with their exciting work, and I'm picking and choosing what goes out there. Coming back to the question of artisans, I personally think it's just a marketing term. It's like hipster or superfood. You know, when like an apple became a superfood. So artisan is just for me a general word that we use, but generally I use the word artist, and that covers a whole umbrella for everyone. And I had an interview with Gordon. Gordon interviewed me. We had an interview, and I talked about the word skill because I'd shown a Danish silversmith called Klaus Bjerring, and he wanted to tell me that as a Dane, there is no word for skill in Denmark, and he wanted to tell me about the joy of this British English word called skill, which for him is much more interesting than the word craft, because skill conveys that it takes a very long time to get to make something. You know, it's so I now admire that word skill, because it was explained to me what a beautiful English word it is, and it isn't necessarily. So skills take a long time, and I'm in a very joyful position, as I say, of showing the exciting bit, which is the work. So you've got Grant sitting at the end there, and it's really interesting listening to Grant from the education point, but I only know Grant really as an artist, but I know that he's a very enthusiastic person, so I can imagine that he's a brilliant teacher. So for me, the exciting thing about Grant is his work, and so for me, he straddles two worlds. So he understands new technologies, and he's a handcraft worker. So he's a very skilled silversmith. So I feel that he is a perfect person to be teaching. But his work is also really interesting because he's always thinking and engaging. So it's always really exciting, and that's one of the great things about contemporary makers. You know, they're living. I'm seeing the next stage. So for me, when I get a box in the gallery, that's the exciting part. You're opening it up. We're looking at Malcolm Appleby on the screen here, and I know that you want me to talk about Malcolm Appleby, but I could talk about Malcolm Appleby for a long time. But there's a lot of very, very talented people here today, and this is a product. Here's Malcolm in his jumper. He was 70 in January, so I had a Malcolm Appleby at 70. I had an international photographer who had an exhibition in the gallery last year, and he was really interested in everything in the gallery, and he'd caught sight of something in the gallery, and it was by Malcolm, and I started telling him about Malcolm, and just by the description he became interested in Malcolm as a subject. So I have to, you know, I was just talking about marketing, I have to market artists. So this was something that was very gentle, it wasn't deliberate, it just all came together that I happened to get photographs, and I was allowed to use a photograph. It happened to be Malcolm's 70th birthday. I wanted to have an exhibition. It's actually very difficult to have a Malcolm Appleby exhibition because he lives in Scotland. He's not very far away. He is a unique experience, And so actually, a lot of people don't touch Malcolm because why would you come to a gallery when the excitement is this? My first phone call was, where can I buy that jumper? And I said, it took 50 years to make that jumper, so there's some skill for you. And whether you are an established maker or an emerging maker, or you're just in the field in general, I would recommend, while Malcolm Appleby is here, that you go there, whether you like his work or not, because he is an incredibly inspiring individual. So whether you're interested in engraving or whatever, he is a brilliant person. And this happened to be, despite the foul weather that hit all of the UK in January, was a very successful exhibition. You never know why or how something's going to be successful, but all the elements came together. I think people were attracted to the image, which drew them into the work. So this in itself generated a huge amount of PR, which is incredibly important. I'm going to sort of come back to that point about how it's so difficult. You know, you make your work, and that's just one aspect of it. And it was interesting listening to someone talk about all the other skills that you're supposed to also develop. You know, you've got to have a website, you've got to do photography, you've got to market yourself, you would have got to know about accounts. And that's, for many, is the least interesting part. The most interesting part is making the work. So I could talk about Malcolm Appleby all day, but there's lots of other artists that I could talk about. I did want to establish and mark his birthday, and it was very, very successful. And then you think you've cracked it, and then you fall off a cliff and you have a terrible month the next month. So I'll try and come to different aspects of what we do. It's very easy for people to take the Scottish Gallery for granted. Maybe you haven't heard of us, or you just think, we're in Edinburgh. Some people think we're a museum, and it is quite difficult when you have been around for 174 years. We are kind of unique in a way because we show both fine art and objects. And if you come onto our website, there's no hierarchy. Just because you make an object doesn't mean that there's no pecking order. It's just all there. Our exhibitions are there. And we like to think of ourselves as a house, because you may come in to see a painting exhibition, or you might come in to see a ceramic exhibition, but hopefully you'll be seduced by something. We're not a museum, and we're not a shop, but we are retailers. And so we have a monthly program, and it's worked out and designed in advance, because we want that to be a unique experience when you come in, so you'll remember it and you'll come back to it. So the physical experience has to be all encompassing, and the work always dictates the atmosphere. So I feel that's a lot of work. It's a monthly program of up to four exhibitions, and it's taken a long time you don't just start showing metal work. So we have this long history behind us of why people like showing with us, why we show metal work, and so on. And I have to actually, at this point, bring Amanda Gay, my previous director, into what I'm telling you, because she was very, very passionate about metalwork, and she arrived in the gallery in 1987, and metalwork became, I think, is something that we all know Amanda Gay to specialise in. I mean, she specialises in many subjects within the field of craft, but we had something called the Scottish Craft Centre. It used to be at the base of the Royal Mile near Holyrood. It's opposite Canongate Kirk. So that was a very traditional place where you could engage with Scottish silversmiths. The relationship with church silver and so on is quite close. So that's why that's where that physical location was. When they were going through difficulties in the late 1980s, Adrian Hope denies this story, but Adrian Hope apparently marched into the Scottish Gallery and said to Amanda that the Scottish Craft Centre was going to be no more. So what was she going to do about it? And he denies all knowledge of it, but Amanda says that was true. And so Amanda took metalwork up, and one of the first exhibitions that she had, which is still important, is called The Metal Vessel in 1988. And that included the work of Malcolm Appleby, Hamish Barry, John Creed, Graham Crimmins, Maureen Edgar, Howard Fenn, Adrian Hope, Rod Kelly, Michael Lloyd, Sam MacDonald, Gary Morga, Ryan Podges, Mark Powell, Jane Short and Trevor Watson. We're still showing half of those artists. And beyond this, Amanda also explored the wider world of metalwork beyond Scotland and internationally, because as you know, it's such small concentric circles. You're all either influenced by one another, or so suddenly this huge international arena becomes quite small because there's only a few of you working at a really, 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 really high end. And she was so passionate about it. And these were the days before the internet, and so exhibitions were very important, and also establishing solo exhibitions. Silversmiths don't have that much outlet for their work, but I'll come back to that because it's quite complex. And so Amanda established and was very, very bold in picking talent, spotting talent, and being very assertive in that was a talent, and she put everything behind that talent. So we were the first artists to show, we were the first gallery rather to show Simone Ten Hompel, for example. Hiroshi Suzuki had his first exhibition in the gallery. So we've gained a reputation for being the first and being there before the world became all visual with the internet and so on. And it was always very important that that these exhibitions, which would only last for a month, Amanda was quite dogmatic in chasing museum collections, because the world's full of stuff. So an object going into a permanent collection marked that exhibition in the gallery, all that hard work, and the artist's hard work. And so, and we still follow that passionately. So Amanda's put a lot of work into permanent collections, and we still put work into collections. And I've always got Amanda as a sort of terrifying thing in the back of my mind, because if I do something wrong, then I know that she'll give me a row. That's my old term for it. Or she would be, we've got great people that worked in the gallery, and you always have to nod to the history, and you've got that in your mind, as well as trying to maintain very good relationships with established makers. And I also think it's really important to celebrate emerging talent, mid-career, and also those who have been at it for 50 years or more, because sometimes that's a point when you're getting really good at it. So it's always really interesting. It's a bit faded, but that's us. We're in the New Town, which is a World Heritage Centre for those of you who've never been to Edinburgh. So it's set within this great theatrical setting of the New Town. We're on 2 floors, so you've got a grand picture gallery upstairs, and then downstairs you come down to a different series of rooms, and that's how I like to move it. So you've got different exhibitions happening in different spaces. Sometimes I just make the whole thing lead out. This was from 2014, so this was passing it on, so that it was dedicated to the craft of engraving. Malcolm Appleby wanted to do that, and so to sort of bring in that, engraving's an ancient medieval kind of skill. We brought in some work that was complementary, such as 16th century carving and so on, but there was also some great contemporary work. It was interesting that we had the silversmiths art at the National Museums of Scotland, which was the Goldsmiths Hall collection from 2000 to 2015, which is a period of time which I find very, very interesting, because so much has changed. Millennium, the hallmark, all that tradition. There was obviously lots going on with metalwork because of the significance of the hallmark and the significance of the change in time. We were in an unprecedented high economy. We didn't realise we'd had it so good. until everything crashed spectacularly in 2008. And that's when I became a director, so I'm slightly worried about now having become a managing director, because that was a really, really significant happening. I mean, it was like everything changed, and it's quite important for people working in metal, because everything went from stocks and shares to going into old-fashioned investments of gold and silver, which made the material incredibly expensive for silversmiths, and everything changed overnight. And despite that, you see very exciting things have happened. So that 15-year period just felt really, really, just like an interesting time on a sort of economic period. And despite, austerity Britain, we are still managing to get work into museum collections, and I also, if you die, I still show you. Because and you may laugh, but sometimes when an artist dies, that's it. It's goodbye. There's no interest. So I've championed the work of William Kirk, who was always a very shy individual anyway. And I just thought he was going to fade off, and so I've championed his work, and I've got someone here who's taken note of that as well, which I'm very pleased about. And then here we are having another exhibition at the V&A celebrating contemporary work, which is great. So there's all sorts of very, very exciting things happening, but I'm always worried about the economies that we're in. That was the great thing about the silversmith's art, because obviously I'm used to dealing with the really artisan work, and I love seeing all the civic work, and then felt really sad. Places like St Giles, they can only bring the silver out on ceremonious days under a huge amount of security, and so a lot of civic work has just disappeared, and that's bad, because then the material's disappearing from consciousness. And so, the future, which was, Gordon, I'm so sorry, it's one of, my totally nihilistic view is, which is something that worries me a great deal, is I'm seeing very young generations totally living through their mobile phones and devices, and everything's virtual. And my nihilistic worry is that all art could be something that you might subscribe to, and you just experience it virtually, and that the whole experience of actually engaging with work disappears. That's the most nihilistic. On a more practical view, I see what I'm seeing coming out as something that's actually really real, is that we're seeing a lot more sculptural work, silver being used non-functional as a sculptural material, so therefore it doesn't necessarily fit within a classical, this is silversmithing, it's sculpture, it just happens to be made of a precious metal. So that's one aspect that I'm seeing where it will survive, because that reaches out to, it appeals to all sorts of people. And in terms of functional wear, I see design and technology totally taking over that aspect of it. Sorry, I've rabbled on. Okay, yeah, I'm fine.
I was really struck by, I'd assumed somehow that your priorities would in some sense be commercial. Well, obviously they're not, because you've spoken so richly of the aesthetic qualities and experiences of these products.
I'm not a market trader.
No.
No. I have to respond to the beauty of the work. So I have to create a beautiful environment for the work. It's not just plonk down and price tag on it and you hope for the best. Yeah. It's got to be an experience so that you really want it, and by accident you might acquire it. So I'm not a shop, but I am a shop.
Well,
but it's a different reality. So if you log on, I mean, I hope that there's so many people I never see them. I deal with them virtually, which is one of the great things about it. So, and people trust me because we're the Scottish Gallery, and we have shown a commitment to a material and a medium. I mean, we happen to show all mediums, which makes it more difficult for me to commit to doing lots of things. But
yeah, we've probably got time for just one quickie. If there's somebody from the floor who perhaps like to connect or ask a question about some of the issues that have come up more generally this morning.
Okay. I was really interested about your nihilistic view at the end, and do you see also a kind of response in the opposite direction, almost like a kickback to where people are interested in getting their hands on real things, and they're kind of fascinated by the base level of skill and holding things in their hands?
yes, absolutely. But I'm finding that it's become quite polarised. It's becoming. I think it's. I mean, I mean, we're on the street, so you can just come in. But I appreciate that for some, coming into a gallery is still quite a traumatic experience. They just think, oh, I'm too poor or whatever. And we're always trying to get people just to come into the gallery because we have the same struggles as any other retailer on the street. It's the people on the street that you want to come in, and we're very lucky. We actually have a lot of people that come in. We have some people that come in every day. We're just part of people's lives. The nihilistic thing comes from, children and the game world and so on. And I know that a lot of young of that generation are completely bypassing real experience. It's putting a lot of our young generation off from travelling, which is put off by the reality, which is the world at the moment has never seemed so dangerous. But then that may be because information is so readily available. But I see that people are just living through images, so therefore they bypass the experience. And I've got educationalists here. I mean, the word plagiarism is something that I find almost pointless trying to explain. If someone comes into the gallery who's a student and they haven't looked at the work, they've just gone around like this because they were told to and then gone out. They're not learning. It's the student that stands there with the pen and the pencil who actually gets to grip with the work. So that's my only concern. But I see sculptural work where it's non-functional as having as being able to cross the barriers of. It's not people who are necessarily looking for metalwork. They're just attracted to the work. We've got Adi Toch here. Her work. We had a fantastic showcase exhibition of her work 2 years ago, and actually I've been clocking the ages of people that buy work. And Adi actually fell into a great category where it was people just saw the work, didn't think of it as metal. They're just attracted to it. Because I have to clock I'm having to engage with all of this all the time as to where anything's going to go. And so the age group that Adi was in was quite young. I did get a commission for a classic silver teapot from a 92-year-old this year, and that is also typical. So I'm always a little bit frightened, and then I'm proved wrong.